Awesome. I think it's recording. Well, thank you all for being here. My name is Diana, for folks who don't know me, but I know everyone. So I think, yes. So since it's a small group, I want us to just go ahead and have folks like introduce themselves. Since it is a small group, I also want this to just be more of like a conversation, and folks can also share a little bit about their own perspective, their own experience when thinking about graduate school, especially in STEM. So I welcome folks to introduce themselves. Nicolette, do you want to go ahead and start?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Nicolette Pierman. Pronouns she, her, hers, and I'm a retention specialist with the AEC STEM program, and I coordinate programs and events as well as STEM Arrive. Totally forgot what I did for a sec. And I'll popcorn to Malia. I'm so sorry if I said that wrong.
No, you said it right. um, my name is Malia, and I'm a second year student at CSU, studying sociology, and I'm mainly here because I want to be a professor, and so graduate school is definitely in the plan.
Hello, I'm Shauna, and this is my second semester at CSU. Hello. And yeah, I'm a psychology major for now and hoping to stop at my master's and do some counseling and hopefully in trauma, but also thinking about drug and alcohol counselor, but definitely grad schools in the future. So yeah, so I'm happy to be here. Hello, everyone.
Thank you all for sharing. I hope that in this time together, even if we don't go the full hour, that we can share kind of just like some questions. Even if we don't have an answer, I think I will make a note of those things and I can follow up with folks because I know Malia and Shauna. And then it can also be part of just like a follow-up email for folks who might have similar questions. So just as a reminder, we're also just asking folks to fill out the CLF evaluation, which is found on the website. So if folks just need to reference that, please do so at the end. And if folks need to head out early, that's totally fine as well. So let's just go ahead and jump right in. So a little bit about what the flow of this presentation is going to focus on is like the following. So we'll do a little of like a reflection activity that gets students thinking about why graduate school. And I think you all have already a clear understanding of why you're pursuing graduate school. But I think it can help really align like some career goals and align why a graduate program might meet those career goals. And so we'll spend a little bit of time doing that. We're also going to do a little bit of a breakdown of like degree options for graduate school. That might be familiar for folks in the room or it might not, and that's totally okay. I think we're just going to explore that a little bit more just to get folks comfortable with the idea of different options. We're also going to talk a little bit about some things to think about as like preparation / planning as an undergrad student, whether you're a first year, second year, third year, fourth year, right? So things to consider. And we're also going to talk about funding. Funding is always just like a really important piece to know early on for graduate school income, and also a topic to always revisit just so that folks can feel comfortable and knowledgeable about the information moving forward. And then we're also going to talk about some resources. So we're going to talk about CSU resources to continue learning and getting folks like moving forward towards their graduate school goals, whether they're on campus or within just like the AEC resources. I do want to name that this is the part one, Cliff, and so there is a part two coming. So if you feel like a lot of this information are things that you already know, and you're just kind of getting a refresher, it's okay. We're going to have a part two that focuses a little bit more on getting materials and preparation and preparing for the actual process of applying. So something to look forward to next week. Okay, so this is a little, some folks might have seen this already. So we've used this in our graduate school conference, the career, this is housed with the career. So I just want to make sure that folks know that. And the graduate school department on campus also utilizes this on their website as kind of a resource guide for students who are starting to explore graduate school. And so there's this statement in the handout that they tend to provide, and that handout is going to be gone over a little bit more in depth in the part 2, but this is more of like a reflection. So the statement reads, my career goals are, and folks will outline a few career goals. And folks will also outline graduate school will help me because. So I want folks to take some time to think about this a little bit. And I know that the folks in this space have already shared a little bit of those pieces, but this is now an opportunity to help connect the goals with why folks want to pursue graduate school. So take some time. If you want to turn your screen or video off for a couple minutes, I'm going to give folks about 5 minutes, and then we're going to come back and share out just to get folks thinking about this. I'm going to also write one just to help me provide an example as well. Nicolette, if you want to write one, I know that you're already applied for graduate school, but why you initially thought about applying for graduate school.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I'm writing them out. You best know I am.
Can folks give me a thumbs up when you're ready? Awesome. Thanks, Malia.
Dang, y'all so quick. Ooh, I'd be struggling. I'm ready.
You don't need to do all 3 if you're like feeling like it's taking a while. If you want to just do one goal and then one way that graduate school will help. And Nicola, can you also help me monitor the chat?
Yeah, Shauna said that she's good.
Oh, okay, thank you. So I can go ahead and just start as an example, and then if other folks want to share, I would love to hear kind of what folks felt about this activity. So before I start, I just want to preface that after I did my undergrad, I took a couple of years off and was working in education, in AmeriCorps, which is a service work, just giving myself a little bit of time before pursuing graduate school. But when I was an undergrad, I did want to pursue graduate school, and I knew what kind of program I wanted. So I was trying to think about like back then, like what was my thought process. So I wrote down that my career goals were to work in higher education, such as in TRIO programs like the AAC, to work with students like myself, pursue higher education and feel supported throughout their experience in higher education. Graduate school will help me, well, when I was thinking back then, will help me because I learned that it was a master's program specifically for higher education and student affairs, and it focused exactly on what I was looking for to help me understand the higher education system, the theory to support students in different populations, like from different populations, with assessment, budgeting, and it will help me apply for higher positions once I enter into entry-level positions. And so when I was an undergrad, I did human development and family studies. But when I really wanted to go into higher education, I learned that there was a master's program specifically for folks to go into that role. So I felt like it aligned perfectly. It just took a couple of years, but it worked out. Does anyone else want to share?
I guess I'll go next. I kind of already mentioned this when I introduced myself, but my career goals are to work in higher education and, be an assistant professor. And in order to do that, like I need the skills from graduate school and have, likely will need some research under my belt with like a thesis and all. So it's just the natural next step. And I think it'll also help me like prepare any college students that I am in contact with once that's my career, to like set them up for graduate school as well.
Thank you for sharing. Anyone else want to share?
Hello. Yeah, so I think, well, aside from in psychology, there's not a whole lot you can do with just a bachelor's degree as far as counseling or working with trauma victims or people who've suffered PTSD, which is my long-term goal. I also think she mentioned research. Yes, definitely in preparation for and during grad school, being able to be more hands-on with research and really what that's going to entail. And also I was thinking too, just to make more professional connections. I've already, been introduced to people through the AAC and just getting to know my professors last semester and now. And so I just think just the farther we all go, towards grad school, just more and more people and their stories and pathways can open up, that maybe we're not thinking about right now. So thank you.
Thank you, Shauna. Nicolette, did you want to share? You can also pass.
Yeah, I can share my career goals. I have a few. So just to give some context, I have a bachelor's of science in civil engineering and I got it from CSU. So for my career goals, I have to become a professor in a civil and environmental engineering department, but that's like way, way down the line. More like short term, I want to become a research scholar after I get some graduate school education. And then like kind of in the middle, I want to work with or in a better accreditation to integrate a better degree plan for geoenvironmental engineering, because that's what I'm going to graduate school for, because it's not like really clear right now. I have to like build it as I go. And I'm just like, this discipline is 60 years old. Why isn't there like a better degree roadmap? So I want to help with creating that roadmap. And I also want to do a better accreditation to integrate diversity and inclusion curriculum into undergraduate engineering curriculum, because there's definitely some gaps that need to be addressed.
Thank you, Nicolette. And thank you all for sharing. And I invite folks who are engaging with this recording to also take some time to think about this. If you're feeling a little stuck, I think that that's okay. I think that this initially helps folks really connect the pieces of what their goals are, even if those change later on. I would say like revisit this and continue to revisit these statements to align and help folks align a graduate program if that feels like an option for them right after undergrad or later down the road. As folks have shared here today. So thank you all for sharing. I want to jump now to talk a little bit about a breakdown of degrees. So this is just like very general information, talking through some of the degrees that, and I'm going to go over a few more after this slide. And some folks have mentioned like specific programs. So I would say if you all have anything to add as well, I invite you to add that for folks who are in the space. So I'm going to start off with a master's program. A master's program can be anywhere from 1 to 2 years. Students will specialize in an area of study. Think of it as like mastering a subject really. A master's program typically comes with a thesis / a capstone project. So really something that you're really wanting to focus on with some research, incorporate some of the things that you're learning in the program to kind of back up a little bit about your own research and present that to a committee sometimes, right? So that tends to be kind of like like how folks finalize a master's program. Students will tend to pursue a master's program to help with like advanced and executive level positions or to be in positions that require a little bit more like theory-based information. I just pulled some examples of like master programs. I was looking at the department, the graduate school department on campus. And so you might see that some of these overlap with PhD programs. So it just gives you an idea of like there are master's programs and there are also PhD programs for similar areas. It's just a matter of like what the focus is and what your goal is at the end with either degree. With a PhD program, that can be anywhere from 3 to 7 years. I know that that's like a kind of a big gap of like, okay, 3 to 7 years, or is it going to be like 3 years, or is it going to be 7 years, right? But that depends on the program. And it also depends on how you move through the program. Folks who are in PhD programs, even master's programs, sometimes are navigating like full-time positions at that point. So it can take a little longer. With a PhD program, folks will complete a dissertation. So think of this as like your own research paper. This is where you are really focusing on a very specific topic within your field that you are adding like new information to. You're creating this new information for your field, and you kind of basically become this expert in this like research paper that you create. And so it takes some time, and I'll talk a little bit about how people go through the program in a PhD program to complete that dissertation. So a PhD is very research and theory like focused. So I think Malia, you were talking a little bit about like getting that research experience, and a lot of professors go in the route of like a PhD. Like professors have to have a PhD because they have that expertise and have spent a lot of time creating that new knowledge and spending a lot of time understanding the knowledge within your field. And let's see. Oh, I basically stated all of these things already. Okay. Do folks have any like questions or things that they want to add from their own understanding of like a master's or a PhD?
I think the only thing I could think of is for myself personally, I want to stop at the master's level to gain more experience and to kind of know a better path or route before I take the big plunge to a PhD. I've heard, I can't remember from who, and this is why I'm asking for clarification, that you can work in a field with a master's, obviously, and get experience. And that sometimes when you're working in said field, an opportunity arises or will arise down the line. And then because you have the master's and you've gained some experience, you can be, I don't want to say like paid for, because they're not going to pay you, but they're going to pay the institution to help send you back for your PhD? Or is that just completely made up from somebody?
It's not made up.
Okay.
Yes, I hear what you're saying.
Okay, sorry, I'm bad at getting my words out, as we know.
No, you're good. Yeah, so I think that a lot of folks will find themselves in like positions after like some experience, after master's or a certificate, or even just like a bachelor's. And even this is for both programs, for a master's, a PhD, or a certificate, degrees. Sometimes you can be in a position, I can be in this entry-level position that I am right now. And if I wanted to pursue a PhD, and if my area where I was working wanted me to move up in a position, they can provide supplemental like funding, right? So it depends. It depends on like the organization that you're working with, the institution. So a lot of people will find themselves in like with an employer who's willing to help pay for folks to finish a degree so that they can be in that same company or organization, but in a different position. In school, if you're like in academia, like if you're wanting to be a professor, Maria, like folks will be in like a position in higher education, whether it's working in academics or in student affairs, and folks will get funding from the office or funding from a fellowship to complete a degree. And that's just you already doing the work that you've been doing, but maybe just in a different position. So sometimes opportunities come up that way for funding. And those are really important to know because scholarships are a little different in graduate school. And when you do loans, when you do FAFSA, that looks a little different. We'll go over those pieces, but that definitely is an option for funding. So I would say think about when you are moving from one degree to the next, like think about how your employer can help you with some of those funding pieces.
That's a good point. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Anything else that anyone else wants to add to Shauna's point? Okay, any other questions regarding any of these two degrees? Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and move right along.
I don't have questions for it, but I have like things to like hopefully add that's helpful. When looking at like a PhD, some of the reasoning why it's like so long, like varying wise, is because if you get a master's, it'll help accelerate your process before you start a PhD. So it'll be more on like the shorter side of the time frame. But if you go straight into a PhD, which you can can completely do from undergrad. It'll extend it more towards like that 5 to 7 year time frame. And something else that you could do if you just go straight into a PhD is you can talk with your advisor and map it out in a way where you can have achieved a master's through like midway through your PhD. So if for some reason you like don't want to complete your PhD right now, or if you feel more comfortable with just stopping at a master's, you'll be able to still walk away with the degree. And if you know for sure that you're going to complete your PhD, but you still want to have that certificate for a master's, that's completely fine too. You would be able to graduate with 2 degrees instead of 1. So that's for the PhD. For the master's, something that I encourage you to think about is to look into how does the master's program show up for your specific degree, because that can really intentionally structure your approach for like a PhD. Because for example, with engineering, they have a master's of engineering, which is non-thesis based, it's project or report based. That is really to help you be more successful for working in industry. And that is a harder pathway to take if you're wanting to do a PhD. But there's also Masters of Science in said engineering discipline that is thesis-based or research-based that sets you up to take on a PhD. So look into what type of master's programs show up for your specific degree and discipline and how they set you up for how you want to go, if that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Nicolette. That was really helpful.
You said.
Oh, did anyone else want to share?
So you're saying that with like, is it guaranteed that if you did take like the master's route before your PhD, and it was more like research based, that you would shorten that time, or could you find out after completing your master's that you need to do an additional 7 years?
It depends. It could be either or, and it's really dependent on like the program that you go into, because some programs are like more flexible with it, like they'll be accepting of those credits from your master's programs, while other PhD programs may be like really stingent and just be like, you have to take our courses. I don't care that you got a master's. So it can go either way. It'll take some time for you to like do research to see, will they incorporate your master's courses during that timeline, or are they just really strict and you have to go through their program as is? Does that answer your question? Okay, awesome.
Thank you, Nicolette. So I'm going to go ahead and jump right into more like another visual that breaks down both of the programs a little bit differently. So this gives you kind of like a comparison of some of the information we were just talking about. And this is one entire table. It just had to get broken down to fit into the slide. So it's talking about the time to complete both programs. It gives you that breakdown again. It focuses on like what kind of research is required when you're doing both programs, right? You'll see that that's different for a master's and doctorate degree. I mean, it just has the number of like folks who have either or degree. I don't feel like that really matters in this presentation. That was just a part of the chart. And then it also has information on like the skill focus. And so like why sometimes folks might go for one degree or the other, and like tangible things that come from that degree itself when you obtain it, right? And then the expertise. And so when going into a master's, right, gaining deep industry specific knowledge rather than in a doctorate degree, you contribute original knowledge to the field. So kind of a little bit of what we talked about earlier. So a lot more intensive in like research and that sense of information. And what does that look like for career advancement? So you'll see that those differences are there as well. And those are things that we kind of mentioned a little bit already. But this gives you just another visual of how these degrees are a little different. And I do want to state that something that Nicolette did mention, right, is like some folks will go straight into a PhD after and like a bachelor's, right? And that very like much depends on like your field and your goals and like what program makes more sense. So I would say when you are looking at the things that Nicolette talked about in the sense of like what requirements you need and like maybe you get 2 degrees out of one program, it's a matter of just like what comes from that research that you're doing when you're looking for programs. Do they have that information online? Do they have someone you can contact to when you can just ask when you're doing orientations, things like that. So those are important things to consider. So thank you, Nicolette, for sharing that. Anything that anyone wants to add to this or they have questions about in regards to this information on this slide? Okay, I'm gonna now go and talk a little bit about like the program breakdown for both of these degrees. So this is a little bit of like the layout of like what the coursework would look like. For a master's degree, the core courses are required to complete your master's degree and are considered essential knowledge to advance your industry expertise. Also comes with electives, and that just depends on the program. And so there are selections of courses that allow you to further specialize your degree with concentrated knowledge in specific areas. They can also be used to broaden your experience in related subject areas. So sometimes some programs will offer different options of taking an elective on this in this semester. Some programs will just have a course, like a core course, like this is what you're taking each semester and everyone's doing this, like a cohort experience. And some programs will allow you to choose different ones that you might be taking with other programs with folks from other master's programs. So it just depends. It also comes with a capstone course or thesis. So, right, so it's the culmination of a master's degree. A capstone course or thesis usually involves conducting research and presenting your findings. And so getting support in that last final requirement for the program. For a PhD, so think of like when we talked about like the 3 to maybe 7 years, right? It really comes down to like these concepts of like, okay, there's coursework involved, right? Advanced courses are required knowledge for passing your comprehensive exams. There's research, so those courses impart essential research, analytical and writing skills to prepare you to complete your dissertation. There are comprehensive exams. So that's really to test your understanding of key concepts that you are learning through your coursework, and passing the comprehensive exams is essential before beginning your dissertation. So that's really where folks are looking at, am I moving forward with a dissertation? You get a lot of support in these areas, right? Like you're working with faculty, you're working with other folks on the program, a committee, and then the dissertation comes later on with the PhD. And this is where you're really working on identifying a research topic. You're completing that in-depth research analysis and writing before you defend your original research to your dissertation committee. So you're really focusing on like what's something that based on your field that you really want to focus on. And that's really where you're creating that new knowledge through that dissertation. Yeah, do folks have any questions about the layout of these two programs and like what that looks like? Does anyone want to add anything? Okay. Sorry, I feel like we spent a lot of time with those two specific degrees, but I'm going to go ahead and jump right on to other options. So we're going to spend some time now talking a little bit about certificate programs. So this looks very different, right? So folks will do 1 or 2 semesters with the certificate program. Sometimes folks are doing that before they graduate, even from their undergrad, or folks will do that after they graduate while they're in a position just to get specialized in a topic or an area. Sometimes when you go into an entry-level position and you're thinking about pursuing a master's, sometimes a program or university will offer like certificates before you enter a master's, just to give folks an idea of like what the master's program might look like, or just gain a little bit more knowledge before going into the master's in an area that you're really focused on. It can be, oh yeah, I just stated that, it can sometimes be used to satisfy degree requirements for a master's degree as well. So it just depends on the institution. Not all master's programs will require certificates, but sometimes there are programs that require just like additional things before students are admitted. And some examples of a certificate program include applied finance or data engineering, just some other things that I found with the graduate school department. And there are also professional degrees. So these are designed to prepare like folks for practice-oriented occupations. So the biggest example that I always like refer to this one is like like medicine or law, things like that, that are a little bit more like practice oriented, really like what it says on there. They're very specific skills and knowledge that are required even just for entry level positions. And so some of those examples that I always think of are, right, like doctor of medicine, doctor of veterinary medicine, folks who want to go into law. So like law school would be considered a professional degree. Do folks have any questions about either or for these options, or anything that anyone wants to add? Okay. So I think now I'm glad these work. I wasn't sure if these were going to be like actual gifts or pictures. So some of the things that I think folks are really thinking about now is with the undergrad, whether you're first year, second year, third year, is like, how can you continue like exploring a little bit more and get connected to information for you to feel comfortable pursuing a graduate program. And so some of the things that I was looking at online with different fields like health professions, the graduate school department, just really looking at what they're encouraging folks to do, like future students, is to really explore your field and really get to know like the industry so that you know how your goals fit with like a graduate program. And so sometimes that takes a little bit of digging. And some of those pieces really include just like talking to your professors. So sometimes that can be like talking to a professor who you might feel connected to, or maybe even a professor who you know has like some expertise or has done research in the area that you're interested in, even if you've never had this professor. Some folks will just go ahead and schedule some time with folks in the department when they haven't had a connection, but they really want to connect with their research and really want to know a little bit about like their experience with grad school and how they got to where they are right now. Another option for folks who are looking at like the health field is really getting connected with the department / like resources such as the pre-health advising. This is not a resource where students get assigned an advisor. It's more of an additional resource that really wants students to get connected to like their resource. They provide a ton of information regarding what courses you should be taking as an undergrad for prerequisites, some resources for students who are thinking about taking like exams soon and where to get like resources for that. Also providing engagement opportunities such as like workshops, things like that to help students get some additional resources. And also talk to your advisor in your field. Sometimes like if you're not sure like where to gather some more information to explore your field, it's just a matter of like really figuring out if there are things in your department that you might just not know about, or maybe having like connections to other folks on campus who can provide a little bit more information. Another huge thing would be just like professional personal development. So throughout undergrad, like how do you engage in like student organizations? How do you engage with events on campus that are really geared towards like helping you grow to like better understand your field? And so sometimes that includes like internships. Sometimes that includes maybe your department is doing like a research series of information and you're gaining information on like what's relevant in your field right now, like ethical things that are important, huge changes or trends in your field, right? And so when you're really staying up to date with your field and understanding those pieces, that's part of like the professional and personal development, and are things that you can really attest to when you're doing an application, that you were proving to an institution that this is how you were also growing outside of like, maybe you didn't have like a ton of internships and that's okay, but you engaged in all these other opportunities that helped you like really understand your field a little bit better, that helped you identify your goals within your career and helped you identify like how you want to engage within your field. Whether that's also like getting involved with the community, maybe with an organization outside of the institution. And another thing too that you can be doing now is explore programs. It's never like too early to explore programs. I think if anything, it helps students feel a little bit more comfortable with the idea of looking at like graduate programs and getting comfortable with understanding what an application like can look like, what the costs can look like, maybe what a timeline can look like. And a way that folks have done that, specifically in our office, is like connecting with current grad students. And so a way that folks can connect with current grad students is through like sometimes departments or offices like the AEC will host like panels with like current graduate students through like the AEC Graduate School Conference. Sometimes departments will also do that. The Career Center will also host a graduate school conference, do similar things. And I've also seen folks connect with other graduate students via like an online presence. So think of LinkedIn. So the way that I've seen folks connect with other grad students online, hello Brandon, welcome, is by like looking up the institution on LinkedIn, trying to find who's connected to the university on LinkedIn, looking to see what department they're in and what program they're in. And maybe you'll find a few folks who have stated that they're currently in this grad program that you're looking for. And that's a way for folks to connect. Kind of like an easier way to find folks on there. But yeah, do folks want to add anything to any of these pieces or any other things that you have done yourself to like prepare or like think about grad school that maybe are not included in here?
I got stuff to say, but I wanted to wait to see if there was any questions. Okay, feel free to cut me off if y'all got questions. I just wanted to like really encourage you with that talk to professors piece. Talk to professors like here at CSU, as well as the programs that you're interested in, because ultimately they're potential advisors, graduate advisors for you, and they will know like through and through to answer your questions that you have for graduate programs. That's something that I did for every application that I submitted. I looked for professors that were specifically teaching or was in my area of focus that I wanted to go into for graduate school. And I asked them like, hey, I'm interested in going to like your school, or I'm interested in your program. Can we set up like 15 to 30 minutes so I can ask you questions about like your experience through teaching the program, questions from like a student perspective that have gone through your program that you've advised, and then just specific questions about the program overall. And that like really helped me contextualize where I want to go for graduate school. So definitely connect with professors that you're interested for their specific programs. But in the same breath, also thoroughly look on the website to see if outreach is okay to do to professors, because I did notice with one of my applications, I didn't look thorough enough, and they said somewhere on the website that it's strongly encouraged not to connect with professors and ask them like intentional questions. So just make sure it's okay to do outreach, and if it is, definitely do outreach to professors.
Thank you, Nicola. And I think you really speak to a lot of things that you can do like as early as like just exploring the idea of graduate school, and also like once you're ready to apply or you're already in the process of applying, and even after applying, right? Connecting with professors who are in that graduate program. So yes, thank you for sharing that. Does anyone have like any questions in regards to like maybe things that you also have been doing now to explore graduate school a bit more, or talk to people, like other things you've done?
I haven't done too many things outside of what you've mentioned, but just the panel I was invited to last semester and just hearing everyone's stories and sharing their path. I took a lot of notes. I've also spent time looking at schools, Colorado Springs, and what CSU offers as far as master's programs. And then I picked like 3 or 4 other states that I would, be willing to move to or could possibly afford to move to, and started looking at the programs that they offer there. And if in my field in psychology, I noticed that a lot don't have a master's program. A lot of schools do have just a PhD. So just kind of balancing what offers what, and kind of what you just did here a moment ago, but with other schools and looking at professors. I didn't think to check whether or not you could contact them. So that's a good thing to look out for. So I appreciate that. But yeah, just getting the ball rolling over here, because cost has always been so scary. But after I spoke with you, Deanna, the last meeting we had, it just reminded me that there are so many options, there are so many scholarships or opportunities, and really just got to get out there and kind of see what we can find out. So it's very intimidating, but also encouraging that I won't have to go like $250,000 in debt to really make this happen, because I think that's what so many people don't go to school, is they just like, yeah, right, I'm never going to be able to have that money. So it's nice to just start getting the ball rolling, I guess. So that's all I've done.
Yeah, thank you, Shauna, for sharing. Awesome. So we're going to go ahead and jump on into the next slide, which just talks a little bit about some things to consider when you are thinking about graduate school. Also, it's like how to prepare, but also things to consider. So just some of the things is making sure that your coursework and the things that you are doing now for your major are all in place for any prerequisites. And so you can look at programs now and look to see like what courses they require from an undergrad, bachelor's. And so programs will give an outline of that. I think that an office on campus that does a really good job with that is, I keep going back to the pre-health advising. And I put that as an example all the time, just because their website, if you haven't checked it out, and maybe Nicolette, you can help me pull the link on the chat just as an example, even if folks are not in pre-health. It just gives folks a good context about like, here are courses that you should be taking as an undergrad, regardless of what major you're in. You can be in like a Spanish major and be taking all the prereqs for maybe medical school and still apply, right? And so it's, as long as you are understanding like your prereqs. And so sometimes it's hard to know what that is, but if you want to start looking at the programs to look at those requirements, it's going to be important to do so. Your department might have information on that as well on the website. And if you're not really sure, I would just check in with your academic advisor just to make sure those things are somewhere if they do have a resource and you can have access to that. Just learn a little bit more about your field. I keep mentioning this because I think it's really important. And so just be aware of like the important things that are going on in your field, like ethical pieces, theory, practices that are relevant. I think this helps students really get an understanding of like, what are things that I can be doing now to kind of also be like engaged in this information and be like a good candidate for a program, right? And so sometimes it includes like internships that help folks really understand some of these pieces a little bit more, with things that are very important in your field at the moment, maybe engaging with community, volunteer opportunities that really cover some of the important things that maybe your field is really focused on at the moment. And so also consider what are opportunities that are going on campus where I can get some of that perspective into personal development / professional development. So a lot of that includes student organizations. So a lot of student organizations, especially when it comes to organizations that are focused on like your field, what they really focus on is getting students like involved in their community with like internships, volunteer opportunities, going to conferences for like your field, doing like research, presentation, things like that. So I feel like student organizations do a really good job at helping students get like really well-rounded information that helps students go into their field a little bit more prepared and with a little bit more experience. And so that's just like a really good thing to look at. If you're not feeling like there's an organization on campus that fits like what you're looking for, I would just check in with your academic advisor in your department. Maybe there's something else that you can get involved with that's not like a student organization, but like another opportunity, maybe working with like a faculty member, maybe doing some volunteer work, maybe even something off campus, honestly. And so it's just a matter of looking to see what fits your goals and what fits like the field where you're learning a little bit more about your field. I would also say creating an online presence is important. And by an online presence, to learn a little bit more about your field, I think a really good platform for this is LinkedIn. I know LinkedIn sounds, I don't know if it's like underrated or overrated for folks. But I think it's a really good resource that the Career Center always just really likes to vouch for, because it really, if you're not familiar with LinkedIn, the way it works is that you connect with folks in your field, you're connecting with employers in your field, and it also serves as kind of like it has a feed of information. So folks are sharing like relevant information with each other, right? Like, hey, this new research theory came out for like psychology, and it's good for folks to like know about it, right? Things like that. And so it's a way for folks to kind of keep updated with things that are going on in your field, and also keep an eye out for opportunities such as positions, if a graduate program is hosting, maybe engagement opportunities, or they have a scholarship, right? And so LinkedIn is just like a way of sharing that information in a more like formal way. So just getting involved, whether that's like through an internship experience, like I mentioned earlier, community engagement / volunteer, engaging with like your department. So sometimes you'll see newsletters coming through with information of resources. So really take a look. I know sometimes emails can be like a lot with just coming from maybe our office, other departments, other offices on campus, but really looking at what really interests you and like what can help you get a little bit more understanding of your field so that you're feeling good about making those decisions. Also, just like research and lab experience are also a really great way to get a feel for like what that can look like in the future, and connecting with professors through those experiences to help open opportunities for things in the future. Any questions? Nicola, are there any questions in the chat?
No, there's not.
Okay. So we're going to talk a little bit about funding now. So I'm just going to briefly go over some pieces. I won't have everything in here. This is, I think we'll go a little bit more in depth with funding for the part 2 for this workshop. But here are just like some things that are available. So graduate fellowships. So it's really, a graduate fellowship is where you apply for a graduate fellowship, and it gives folks an opportunity to work in like your field. You are getting paid, and so some might include work obligations and some might not. Some might work as like a scholarship. And so you can find fellowships within an institution. So if you're going to a different school, just look to see if they offer fellowships. It can be offered by the government, or it can be like a local or national organization as well. Assistantships, you work for the institution, and in return you have your tuition covered. So when I was in graduate school, I worked for housing. I was an assistant resident instructor, and they covered some of my tuition. So some assistantships will cover some of your tuition, like a portion, or some may cover all of your tuition. So take a look at those pieces as well, because that can be an opportunity. For folks who complete FAFSA, you will still want to do the FAFSA for grad school. This will determine eligibility for grants and federal loans. Loans will look a little bit different for graduate school. So just ensure that you are doing the FAFSA every year for graduate school as well. And just some scholarships, right? So sometimes it's hard to like look for scholarships, especially when there's so much information online, and it can be like deceiving, not knowing like what's valid, like what is actually a scholarship and it's not a scam. So when you're thinking about scholarships, it's always good to start off with just like the university that you're planning on attending. So what scholarships are open to all students? So kind of think of like the CSUSA as an example for CSU. Sometimes you'll just want to look at your college or your department that might be offering scholarships just for maybe the College of Business. And then also just for your program scholarships. So though that's also going to be just like another way to look for in-house scholarships. I would also take a look at state scholarships, local organizations, or like any corporate scholarships that are like pretty well known, or things that you can identify online and know that it's not a scam. Some of the things that Shauna mentioned earlier too is that employer benefits are a big thing to also consider when thinking about funding for graduate school. And so when you are in a position, and if they do offer benefits such as like paying for some credits, or if they're looking for you to move up into a position and they are offering any like tuition support for that degree to help you move up in the company or in a specific organization, I think that's also something to consider. Any other things that folks know in terms of funding that maybe are not mentioned in here?
I could add a few things real quick. The first thing is to definitely ask the question to different folks that you're applying to, like the programs. Ask how they prioritize their funding. Because, for example, for engineering, they prioritize funding more likely, more times than not, for PhD students. So there's not a lot of funding for master's students. So ask that question of how they prioritize their funding so you can generally get an understanding of where you should be focusing your efforts for getting funding. If you should be really focusing, applying to funding within the college or department, should you be looking elsewhere for external funding? Also ask like current graduate students or graduate student ambassadors how they navigated securing funding, because they made it to where they are and they have some type of financial package. So ask them, how did they secure their financial package? What did they need to do to get funding to do the program? Something else, it kind of ties back into researching your program. For different professors that you look into, that you're interested in doing research with them, if you are, look and find their CV or resume and look and see the kind of the history of the students that they have advised. Look at how many that they have advised and try to look for trends to see how many they typically take on, so you can kind of get an idea if you will kind of get into the program or not get into the program, if that makes sense, because funding is really crucial when it comes to research programs. An example that I can give is that I applied to Northeastern University, and I looked at the professor that I wanted to do research for, because there was only one from my discipline. And I looked at his CV, and he typically had 5 to 6 students each year that he advised. And I noticed that he currently only has 6 students. So he was like at his max for what he usually takes on. So I had a feeling that I wasn't going to get into the program because of that. And so when I got my denial letter, I wasn't too shocked. I felt like that was the main reason. But when I reapplied to the same school to a different program, to different professors, I was able to get in because the professor was taking on fewer students. They most likely had more funding to take on more graduate students. So that's something to take into account, as well as look at their CVs and figure out and find trends of like the students that they take on, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Nicolette, for sharing. That's such a great insight. Yes. Any questions? I think there's something in the chat. Oh yeah. Okay. Cool. Thank you. So let me go ahead and just keep checking along, and like some of the things that Nicolette mentioned, I think are going to be important for the part 2 of this CLF to keep an eye on for next week. So if you can attend, welcome, and come. If you can't, we'll have the recording also available. So some campus resources, some of the things that like we've kind of like mentioned here and there throughout this presentation is just some of these, and also there might be a ton more that are not included, but just here are some general things that are pretty much like similar across all departments in terms of like how can you continue in exploring graduate school. So the Career Center, I think, is like a lot of folks don't know that they do a lot of graduate school like work, and so some of the things that they have are like major to career roadmaps. And so when you go to their website, Nicolette, I don't know if you have like the notes to this presentation, but I have a link in there that provides students an example of the major to career roadmap. So they do a lot of like blogs on their website with a ton of information and resources. I even go to it a lot, honestly, to kind of keep an eye out on things that could be incorporated in presentations like this. And so they have a major to career roadmap. So like maybe business, engineering, and it gives a layout of a lot of like things for students that they could be doing now. And it's very more direct towards like your field. I don't know if you found something, but let me know, yes, and feel free to post it on the chat. And if not, I can also do it at the end. So that's always like a great visual. They do a lot of like great visuals and a lot of blogs that have great resources that I always pull from. They do a lot of events, and so some of those include an annual graduate school conference that they do for all CSU students. They'll have events like the career fair, symposiums with like research, employer like connections with students. And so there's just a ton that the Career Center does. So I would say it's definitely underrated with like a lot of the work that they do. So check them out. And they also do like advising for folks to talk a little bit more about maybe exploring graduate school. I keep going back to also like talking about departments. Like your department's also always going to house like a ton of different opportunities for you to keep an eye out. So via like newsletters, events, and opportunities that can include research series, scholarships, internships, information about faculty. That's how maybe some folks will see more information about faculty that they want to connect with, even though they haven't had class with them. And so just keep an eye out for those opportunities. Going back to just like connecting with professors themselves and academic advisors. And so start talking to folks about your interests. So if there are professors that you really just like enjoy talking to, even if they're not in the field that you're wanting to be in, or they don't have the research that you're looking for, just getting connected with them can help you get connected to someone else. And also maybe just doing the outreach yourself with professors who you might not have connections with, but you want to connect a little bit more to learn about maybe how they got there, because they're going to be in a role where they most likely got a PhD and kind of understand the process a little bit more of like, this is what pursuing graduate school can look like within our field. Ways to get involved and just like for additional opportunities like research and internships, things like that, are going to be through the SLICE office. The SLICE office has the RAM link resource where students can look at organizations and active organizations. You can also find organizations through your department that are very focused on like a field. And then education abroad is just really using that resource to gain research and internship experience abroad, if that's something that really interests you. So I would consider those pieces as well. Anything that anyone else wants to add in terms of campus resources that are maybe not listed in here that folks know about? No? Okay, cool. And then the last thing I want to chat about is just like upcoming AAC resources. Well, not like all upcoming, but something to keep in mind is the cliff for part 2 of this presentation. So that's going to be more focused on like preparing materials, thinking about like how to research programs, how to keep things organized, how to start thinking about exams, how to create a timeline, all those things. That's going to be happening next week on February 25th from 4 to 5. We'll also have that recording available on our website for folks who can't attend in person. Every year, we also have an AAC annual graduate school conference. It tends to take place in the fall. So that's always a great resource to keep an eye on. And we are working on like, how do we just give access to folks to like that information beyond just that semester, and how do we house those resources and have them open for all students. And then just connecting with your retention specialist, connect with us and start just like engaging with us regarding like your goals, just so that we can talk through more one-on-one about everything that was mentioned here, and talk a little bit more about how we can support you. Even if we don't have an answer to something, we can help get you connected to a resource and help you look for those answers. And so just always connect with us. Those are all the things that I wanted to go over. I know we're right at time, but I do want to make sure that we have time for folks to share any questions or comments that they have. So I welcome folks to the floor. Oh yes, thank you, Nicolette. If folks have to head out, please complete the cliff evaluation. Your feedback is super important. Yes, Brandon, I see you raise your hand. Go for it.
Thank you. What are the things that you feel students should consider when selecting graduate schools that maybe aren't the typical things, like obviously like that the program matches up with your career goals, like maybe some of the like the side stuff. So for instance, I've been looking at grad schools and I've been looking at the campus size and like how green it is and how like beautiful the campus is, because I love to walk around this campus. So like that's important to me, that the campus is actually like not super urban, or like in the city, and like there's like lots of trees and stuff. So like, what are things that you would suggest?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that folks will have different things that are important to them. And so I would say create like an outline of what those, like what you're looking for each institution. So where it's located, the university size. I also would say like some of the things that Nicolette mentioned is also like the faculty who are in the program. Are there faculty in there who really match with like what you're hoping to dive a little bit more into in terms of research, getting connected with them, look at the size of the program. I was looking for like a small cohort program as an example. Some programs are not cohort based and you just go through it and people take different paths. So people are doing their own thing. Some programs will also have just different assistantships that they can offer. Some have assistantships for everyone and some have just assistantships for a few. So it says a lot about how much funding they're able to provide. Also looking at, do they provide any housing support when you are moving out of state? That's a huge thing, right? Especially with the master's, I think like Nicolette mentioned before, there's not a lot of funding for a master's program. And so really looking at how a master's program supports their students, ensuring that they have financial support. And some of that includes like getting students the assistantships that they need to be able to like pay for school, and just additional resources. Sometimes it's also like, I don't want to take the GRE. Does the school require taking a GRE? Like that's a huge thing for some folks. So there's a lot, but I don't know if anyone else has any other things that they would consider themselves that are important for them when they're looking at programs that people want to share.
Yeah, I thought of a few. One that comes to mind is public transportation. How accessible is that? How affordable is that? Different support systems, and just how does support look like. Something that really helped me through undergrad was National Society of Black Engineers. So I intentionally looked for that student organization at each of the programs I applied to see if that's there. I also really want support as a woman in STEM. So I looked for women in STEM organizations for each of my programs. Also look into like the demographics and like the breakdowns and population sizes of your departments that your program is housed into, because it can look very different. For example, one school that I applied to has about 400 students for the civil and environmental engineering department for graduate students only, while another school only has about 60 students for their civil engineering graduate program. So looking at those breakdowns is helpful, as well as demographics. Like I mentioned, something that I noticed is that a lot of the programs are really diverse. They pull in a lot of international students, which is something I didn't notice was like a thing. So looking into like, how does demographics look for your programs too?
Yeah, thank you, Nicolette. Any other things that folks want to share in connection to Brandon's like question for the group? Okay. Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit more about like what that can look like and how to like track pieces like that in the part 2. But thank you, Brandon. That's a really great question. Any other questions or comments that people have? Yeah. I don't have any other information other than just like these resources. This is these are the places where I was like looking for a lot of like information. A lot of this stuff too also is coming from the Career Center website. So really check out that link that Nicolette shared for the roadmap for, what is it, Career to, I can't remember what it's called now, but the link that Nicolette shared, just that whole website of resources that the Career Center houses is really, really awesome and has a lot of great resources outside of even graduate school that you can explore. So take a look at that as well. I'm going to go ahead and hang out here for a few more minutes if folks have questions, but thank you all for being here, and don't forget to fill out that CLF evaluation. And if you are wanting to attend next week, we'll see you then for the part 2. All right, folks, take care. I'll be here if folks have questions.
So I have a question.
Mhm.